We're now being told by the British Film Institute in London that James Bond movies have to have a warning that says will cause offence today. Are you offended by a handsome, white, middle-class, young man?
I'm offended by the warning.
Honestly, and do you know the worst part of this report? It's the British Film Institute.
Ridiculous.
But part of it says the warning of her after 1960 films also claims that as well as being offensive now, it was offensive then in the 60s. No, I lived in the 60s.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I was not offended to see James Bond assuming the identity of an Oriental person because he was working in Japan. Yeah. I mean, it's ludicrous.
Was that Dr. No? The very first one?
No, it was Live and Let Die.
You're right.
Sometimes,
and it was
though, I'm
the
just going to play
volcano
devil's advocate here, Scarlett, but sometimes when you do watch James Bond, it does slightly take my breath away how sexually predatory he was with women. In a way,
agree.
which he was in a way
I totally agree.
shocking.
It was part of the film. There is one scene in Goldfinger which even I found offensive then, and Goldfinger is playing cards in Miami, and James Bond is being massaged by a beautiful young woman, and then the FBI guy turns up. You know, hi James, and James Bond smacks the girl on the bum and says, "That's all now, dear. We've got men's work to talk about." And even I in those days thought that was a bit saucy.
But does that require a warning, though?
No, but what the problem is, so I mean, we know this is that kids brought up now just aren't used to, and I mean they find friends difficult,
really?
Right? Yeah, because you know it's
bland.
So I mean, I have to say that as a feminist, I did find James Bond difficult, even back then. And all they're saying is this was made at a different time. There were different mores.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's fine.
I'm
to
okay
say
with
that.
that. And I want my children to see a time when, if I was sat here with Andrew Pearce, he could smack my bottom on the way out.
Yes.
Absolutely. The world was a freer place. But the cultural appropriation is so ridiculous because there's a great film I love called Where Eagles Dare. Okay?
I love that film.
Right. So do I, and it was on over Christmas.
McLean.
No, exactly. So is Richard Burton then going to be accused of appropriating being a German soldier because he was wearing a German uniform to infiltrate the Germans?
German accent, actually. Very bad German accent.
Come on, I remember a time when, you know, if you were going to have a person who was Indian or cowboys and Indians, that sort of thing, you'd have white people dressed up. And actually, it just meant that people of colour were just never getting parts.
Yeah.
And it's changed. And actually, we wouldn't do it now.
Yeah.
We wouldn't cast Othello as a white guy. We would always cast him as a black guy. Can I say the first black person to play Othello, the reviews said, black people can't do it. It was incredible.
Really?
Yeah.
Can't act.
But their voice is wrong.
Extraordinary.
But with the actor, there have to be a black person.
Yes, well...
You have to be a black person to play Othello. You think you've got to be black?
Yeah, I do, actually.
Right.
I do. I mean, I think it's fine.
But why do so many black people then play overtly white characters?
Like who?
Well, I just watched the other day the film about Mary, Queen of Scots, and her economic advisor was very, very black. Unlikely in that part of Scotland.
Very unlikely in that part of Scotland in those days.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, if you're making a film about Muhammad Ali, you have a black guy playing the boxer, don't you? Was Othello originally a black person?
Well, I mean, the whole point about the Shakespeare thing, I mean, if you read Othello, he was black.
Exactly, so that's what I'm saying. So that means it should be a black person playing it for reality purposes, you know?
I mean, The Famous Five was redone on the BBC this Christmas, and George, who was always a little bit, let's face it, gender ambiguous, even in the original.
She was a complete tomboy. Being a tomboy myself, I thought George was great.
But isn't in this recent iteration, isn't she a mixed race. Gender ambiguous boy slash girl.
Enid Blyton would be spinning in her grave.
Well, I think Enid Blyton.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Enid Blyton was. I have a complete Enid Blyton fan who's read every book.
I love the Famous Five in the
She
Secret
is
Seven.
Deeply racist. If you read,
she was a product. She was a product of her time. 40s, 50s, wasn't she? Very much so. So
the ones that get me is if you get something like a 1930s Yorkshire village, you know, and a vet. I don't think it's ever happened in, you know, All Creatures Great and Small. And all of a sudden you go in the pub and there's black people there. There weren't black people in Yorkshire villages in 1930, you know what I mean? And that's when they try too hard to restore a gender balance. Sorry, a racial balance.
And it stands out because it's so obviously wrong.
You want drama which reflects all
Actually, that's why Bridgerton. That's why Bridgerton was so good. Because they explained.
We've got to move on. We've had a great show this morning.
Characters.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Scarlett. Thank you, Mike. That is it from Britain's Newsroom.